Realizing the right to relate.
Well, welcome everybody. We are here for a really, what I know to be a very incredible presentation. Case has been attending MCC, Founders MCC, for a while now, and has been doing great work while here in Los Angeles. And he went to our social justice ministry and said, hey, can I present some of my findings? And we said, sure, let's see what we can do. And so then he said, well, he has a colleague, Eric Gateri, who is from Kenya, who's also in town. And then I was delighted, Reverend Neil and I met Angeline from Jamaica last week and invited her to join us too. You know, there's so much incredible work that we know we do here, but there's even more incredible work going on around the world. And so, today is entitled Realizing the Right to Relate, 3 activist scholars report on the international movement for equality. And to introduce our first guest, who is Kees Valdijk. I love it. I can't go wrong with that. I love your name, Kees. He's from the Netherlands. He is one of Europe's most distinguished LGBT legal scholars, currently a MacDonald Wright Chair of Law and visiting professor of law at the Williams Institute, UCLA School of Law. He is the inaugural chair of comparative sexual orientation law in the Netherlands, in legal recognition across the globe of the right to love someone of the same sex. He offers 2 ways to assess the legal progress and lack thereof in the field of sexual orientation around the world. He asserts that the right to relate reflects what sexual orientation is really about, not sex, gender, or identity, but the possibility to relate to others. He sees as the common theme underlying all legal programs regarding sexual orientation. He will also share a visual representation of developments in sexual orientation law in all countries of the world since 1966. And so Kees will speak for about a half hour, and then Eric, and lastly, Angeline. And then there'll be some Q&A afterwards and a reception. And then, of course, at 5 o'clock, stick around for our Pride worship service as well. So with that, I am really glad you all are here to experience and to be enlightened by these 3. And so with that, let's welcome Eric. Let's welcome Kees. I was looking at Eric, sorry. Let's welcome Kees and hear what he has to share with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. This is a special moment for me to be here on this stage, in this place, with this select but beautiful crowd. Thank you so much. This is a queer church. I'm not talking about MCC. This building is queer because Christian churches tend to be built with the altar to the east. In a sort of solidarity with pre-Christian beliefs, churches were built towards the Orient, to the place where the sun would rise. Hence the word orientation. Proper churches have an orientation towards the east. This one doesn't have that. But this word orientation, I think, is important, since this, of course, in many ways, this church has an orientation, more than any other church, probably. But the word orientation is interesting. This orientation it's sort of direction, but orientation is stronger. So when you really are orientated towards something, you want a meaningful interaction with that. Yeah, that's what the worshipping of the sun will have meant. The sun was giving, so the sun also received some reference. And this word orientation, of course, we all know that it's an important part in the phrase sexual orientation, yeah? Which sometimes get abbreviated to sexuality. And I think that is wrong. And that's the main point I'm going to make. Sexual orientation, yes, it is about sexuality, as is being preached all months in this place, but it's at least as much about orientation. Yeah? It's about being oriented to others. And I hope now, would this work? Yeah. This is like 500 meters from my home in Amsterdam. This is the Homo Monument of Amsterdam, one of the first Homo monuments in the world. Actually, it consists of 3 triangles, one sticking out into the canal, as everything sticks out into the canal in Amsterdam at some point. One elevated like a stage on a square right behind a beautiful church. And there's a third one, which is in the pavement. So life goes on over it. And this has these words, which you could translate as, to friendship, such a boundless, deep desire, by a famous Jewish, Arab-loving, gay lawyer, poet from the Netherlands. He didn't live long, but he wrote some interesting books on law, some novels with gay themes in the early 20th century in the Netherlands, so that's important. And one of her poems ends with this line, to friendship such a boundless, deep desire. And that's like orientation, yeah? It's the orientation from those in the eyes, he sees it in the eyes of someone. It's orientation, it's direction to something else. And, well, if I was able to walk, I would dance for you, which I'm not for these very weeks. If I was able to sing for you, I would sing a song, since there's a song from Sondheim, and well, there's not too many gay men in the room, but perhaps some of the ladies too have their Sondheim right. The song Being Alive, you know it? From Company. There's a gay man there. It's sung by a single man, again, and it's halfway through the song, it becomes from singing into praying or wishing. And it goes like, somebody, I will say it, and sort of praying in this place, somebody hold me too close, somebody hurt me too deep, somebody sit in my chair, somebody ruin my sleep, and make me aware of being alive, being alive. So this catches something, and the first times I heard this song, this gave me shrills. This catches something of how important relating to others is in humanity, which is basically the theory, and all of you have read something about psychology, presumably, and you know of Maslow, and Maslow say, well, we have human needs. We eat food and clothes and shelter. We need security, safety. And thirdly, we need love, affection, belongingness. And all those things, but the belongingness and the love a bit less, have been translated into human rights. Also the other rights, the right for respect and the right for self-realization, they've been translated into human rights, but the love rights have been sort of slow. However, in the 70s, 80s, in different courts, and there's a courts started to grapple with. They came from the notion of private life, privacy. But privacy in the beginning was very much a sphere closed around you. But then there was a case of someone in Iceland who wanted to keep a dog, and keeping dogs was forbidden there. So he went to the court. Another case of a woman in Germany who wanted to have an abortion. There was a French case of a young man whose parents had moved from North Africa to France. He had got in trouble with the police, and they said, oh, so you go back to Africa. And there was a Mexican case, or several actually, where a woman had been raped by state officials, and the state didn't want to pay. So all these cases gave occasion to these different courts, to develop a right, which is self-evident. And I hope it will be more self-evident to you from today. The right, as they called it, and this will be my only legal quotation for today, the right to establish and develop relationships with other human beings. It's ridiculous that I have to preach in a church to give that right, but it's only 1976 that this was phrased for the first time in a legal context. And since then it has been picked up by courts, by the European Court of Human Rights, by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the Constitutional Court of South Africa, the High Court of Fiji, and other courts. It's become a thing, but it's hardly aware. I'd never heard of it in my studies. And it's sort of subliminal in the legal discourse. So what I've been trying to do the last 2 years, basically, is to give it a better name, the right to relate, and put it central. And I think it's central to everything about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is about loving someone, or wanting to love someone, having sex with that person, not losing your job because of that, all kind of things. And gradually, indeed, this right has been used by courts to, well, the right to marry, yeah, exactly. So it has been used in different cases, and it takes away a little bit from the privacy, this just intimacy. No, it's more than that. Relating is not just what you do in the bedroom. Relating, you also walk hand in hand. So it gives more publicity to love. And of course, heterosexual love is very public. And homosexual love should be as well. So it has been invoked in sodomy cases. Not actually in this case, but this is a hero. If someone needs a Nobel Prize in this field, it's perhaps Jeff Judgen. He was the guy who started a case against the United Kingdom in the 70s and made the European Court of Human Rights for the first time decide, no, it's not right if a country criminalizes sodomy. And that was built on in all kind of other courts. And some countries like the US were a bit late in following it, but he was the one who paved the way. It has been, the right explicitly has been invoked in a famous case about a French lesbian woman who wanted to adopt. She wasn't even allowed, as a single woman, even allowed to register as a potential adoptive parent. She went to the European Court and she won on the basis of the right to establish a relationship with other human beings. Then we have Karen Atala and her lover here. Karen Atala, she also needs the Nobel Prize because she was the first to get the Inter-American Court of Human Rights to phrase, well, to articulate this right, the right to establish and develop a relationship with other human beings, the right to relate, but also the fact that which they have, oh, the pictures goes too quickly, so this is a family. The Inter-American Court said this is family, not just a private life, no, this is family life, what they're having. And sexual orientation is covered by the Inter-American Convention. So she, on many fronts she won. It was a case where she had to choose basically between seeing her children from her previous heterosexual marriage and her lover. The courts wouldn't allow her, and she won after 7 years of long struggle. And then, of course, there's the marriage cases, as you say. These people, you don't know them, but they are famous. They should be in the history books. These are the oldest same-sex married couples of the world on the first day that they met. And I was lucky enough to make them meet, since Kevin and Joe, they are from Canada, and they married, and you'll be proud of that, they married in MCC, Toronto. Early 2001. Next week, they go to the Office for Vital Statistics, and they said, no, this is not a marriage, you're two men. MCC can do marriages, but only different-sex marriages. They went to court, they won. So retroactively, they became the oldest married couple in the world. Same-sex marriage. 3 months later, these two ladies were at the stroke of midnight of the 1st of April. I was there in the Netherlands when the first marriages, which were like valid from the moment on, were celebrated. All 4 of them have been poster boys, poster girls ever since. So they're embodying the right to relate in many ways. And they're nice people too. And did a lot of campaigning. So the right to relate covers all kind of aspects in the courts already, and it has more potential. Since the right to relate, it requires respect for love. Yeah? It requires protection for love. So you don't lose your job or your career in school or whatever because of that. No, you're protected in that relating to the other. Otherwise, you can't develop it. If you only can have a furtive thing and then have to hide it or stop it. No. So respect, protection, and recognition for legal purposes, church purposes, when you travel, that other countries will recognize it. There's a whole legal agenda there, a whole social agenda as well, but I'm a lawyer, so I'll focus on the legal bits. And I think it implies, importantly, the right to come out. The right to come out and the right to come together. Since I don't know about you, but this is Pride weekend. Some people will have traveled a long distance to come to Pride. And perhaps you saw it happening already last night. And there will be apparently even more people tonight and tomorrow. They might meet someone. Yeah? If you were not allowed to come together for Pride, less people would meet. If you were not allowed to assemble in a gay church, less people would meet. And they might meet for an hour, or they might have an interesting weekend afterwards, or much more in their private life, or fighting together, or whatever, yeah? So getting together, without getting together, there is no relating. So organizations should be allowed. not just for the fighting, but also for the private life. Eric will talk more about that, I'm pretty sure. Organizations, Angeline will talk about that, yeah? They're not just there to fight the world, they're also important for the people inside, to find each other. Well, this is a gathering in Nairobi, and I'm grateful for Eric to arranging the event where this photo was taken, but it's been all over the news media. These people are coming out, yeah? They're clearly gay, LGBT. They're coming together. Clearly they're holding each other, intimacy in public. It's all there. Something is missing. They're out as gay, but not out as themselves. So it's again sort of having to choose between you can be out in the street or you can be out yourself, but of course you want both. Coming out is a more layered thing. And also coming out, you come out and then someone else might know that you have a relationship. Not being out at school means that the chances that you will have a fling are very, very small. You will fall in love, but no one will fall in love with you. Or perhaps they will fall in love with you, but then there's a different gender, which is not quite what you want. So for the right to relate, the right to come out and the right to come together are essential. But then it's also other things. The right to relate covers the right not to lose your lover to a hate crime. Yeah, that takes away your relationship. And that's things that have been happening. It means not the right not to lose your country because of the persecution in that country. You're safe in another country, yes, but you lost the whole country with the friends and everything in it. Yeah, it's a violation of the right to relate. It's also the right not to lose your son or your daughter or your classmate to suicide. Suicide is terrible for the person who dies, and the pain you can imagine leading to that suicide. But it's a deep violation of the right of others around that person who were relating or hoping to relate to that person. So all these big issues of LGBT fights that we still have to do are related to this relating. And then when you think about it, the right to relate, of course, is not only relevant for the sexual orientation field. You mentioned marriage. The importance of the opening up of marriage to same-sex couples. Basically, it makes marriage gender neutral. That is a big solution for many transgenders. That if you're somewhere in between or not recognized, yeah, so also the gender identity is often about relating. And actually, some of the first cases, one of the European Court of Human Rights acknowledged that not having a gender reassignment legally recognized means that they could not marry. At least they could not marry the person they love. So also in that area. My background is more sexual orientation, so I focus on that, but it has this big impact also on gender identity, yeah? And then, of course, there's histories in race regulation in this country and South Africa where you could not marry someone of a different race. Only fairly recently. Think of mental disabilities, yeah? The possibilities for people with deep or lesser mental disabilities to find a partner, to be allowed to have sex, to experiment with it. That's still a big, big issue. And then a religion, yeah? Religion is not just about you praying on your own to God. It's also, that's the thing I have more difficulty with. That's further away from me. But what I recognize in this church when I got here during my few months here in this town is that you relate to others. It's being together. It's the community. So religious life is very much at relating to each other. But there's two academics, they follow Maslow, and they say, well, we should talk about relatedness. And they say relatedness is an aspect of people need. And they include in that to be related to nature. And they say sort of a lot of the environment concerns are that people want to relate to their environment, to their nature. And similarly, how people live with their religion belief, live with their God, live with their spirituality, that's also relating to something bigger. So you can put the circles wider and wider. Speaking of which, we should talk about it. That's why I'm here. This is the world. This is the Wikipedia map of homosexual rights in the world. And the bluer the better, and the redder the worse. It's a mixed bag, the world. So I have bad news for you. I have good news for you, and I have bad news for you. There has been all this progress. That's the part of the good news, yeah? You've heard about it. More countries doing marriage, more countries doing anti-discrimination law. fewer countries having criminalization. But still, as we speak, half the countries of the world criminalize homosexuality, either for everyone or at least for adult men, or some countries only when there's an age difference. But in half the countries, more than 100 countries in the world, there's still criminal law. Yeah. 2 in 3 countries don't have any protection against sexual orientation discrimination. 4 in 5 countries, almost all countries in the world, don't recognize in any way same-sex couples. And most countries, I don't have more precise data, but most countries lock people up in their administrative gender, their administrative sex, without recognizing their fuller or fluider or their fuller gender. So the situation in most of the world is bad. Yeah? And that's what we have to remind when we see all this progress. You have to keep in mind. But at the same time, we have been worried about all these bad things happening. Setbacks, Russia, Uganda, Nigeria. So are things getting backwards? Well, in some places, yes. The law got worse. But then we have to be reminded, and now I need Jeff. Is he there? We're going to change the visuals now. I put my glasses on. I can see that. Just wait a little. What I did, I wanted to, and this is basically my other way, sort of the right to relate is one approach to see how far we are. This is a more numerical, more scientific way. If you can do F11, that would be great. Then we see it slightly better. You get handouts after all this. You already grabbed them. Look at them after tomorrow when you're sleeping after this. There's lots of detail in it. This, you don't get, well, read them Tuesday. I designed an index of how far countries are, in which I took account of all these things that are relevant, well, the major things. So decriminalization, same age of consent, anti-discrimination in employment, anti-discrimination protection for other things than employment, health, education, etc. Recognition of couples, civil union ceremony, adoption, marriage, all those things. If they have all, you get 8 points. If they have none, they get 0 points. So that's a way to spread out countries legally where they are. Yep. Then I used data from the World Value Survey. The World Value Survey is interesting because it has been surveying since the 80s, early 80s a little bit and more, since late 80s, 100 countries on all kinds of values. And they asked, well, one of the nastiest questions is, which of the following peoples would you not like to have as neighbors? Which has a sort of an echo of one of the key precepts of Christianity and other religions, but neighbors are interesting test cases. Then you see, so that you have a list of Jews. Would you like to have as neighbors? Muslims, people with a criminal record, drug addicts, homosexuals. The list is longer. So this, then you get the number of people who ticked homosexuals as one of the groups they would not like to have as neighbors. And interestingly, that also spreads the countries of the world basically from 1% to 99%. So the countries are very, very different on that. And you can read some country names there, yeah? Right. Yeah, so presumably even the gays and lesbians in Jordan don't want other gays and lesbians as neighbors. Egypt similarly. Yeah. Whereas Denmark, Netherlands, still 87, there's some 12% who don't want that. So, yeah, so there's social. So this is a measure of homophobia. It's a public opinion poll. It's all kind of sort of, it doesn't say the whole story, but it says something, yeah? Well, now is highlighted Asia and Oceania and Europe. We'll do the other half of the world, Africa and America, in a little bit. If you could, Jeff, if you could press run, then you'll see the history of the last, in 100 seconds, you see the history of the last 25 years. This is what's happening. You see little movements. Countries have been gone up legally. So if you came in depressed, this might uplift you a little. There's movement, there's progress. Then also you see there's social movement. Quite a few countries became less or more gay-friendly to their neighbors, basically, at least in public opinion surveys. Yeah, mostly that's correlated, but Slovenia, an example of a country where it was difficult situation, country breaking up from Yugoslavia, they went backwards a little. But most countries, they move either a standstill or they move socially up and legally up. And you see it's highly correlated. And this is a good thing to remind lawyers of, that law is not everything, it's also the social thing that reinforces it. But it's also good to tell non-lawyers that, yes, law plays a role. Law reinforces what people think. And probably the thinking will reflect it in how they actually behave to their neighbors. So there's a general trend. And so India is moving slowly. India, Singapore is two examples of countries that have come quite a bit in gay friendliness, but the law is not there yet. They both still have criminalizations, but they might. There's a case in India. There has been a case in Singapore, but that was lost in Parliament, discussed about it. So that's on the belly of the curve. Now we're almost, it gets pretty crowded on the top, you see. There's all these European and New Zealand as well, countries that do marriage, adoption, the whole range. There's still some problems there. You see it's still not 100%. Only Iceland gets to 1% people want to have gay neighbors and don't want to have gay neighbors. So this is the situation now there. And now, yeah, you see the name's a bit better. That's that part of the world, sort of the old world. Yeah. What can you learn from it? So the reinforcing, the optimism. So this is the good news. In general, so Russia, going back, Nigeria, Uganda, these are exceptions to a much broader pattern of things actually moving forward. Jeff, if you now could deselect Asia and the 3 European categories and select the Americas and then do run, then we start in 87 again. So this is the Americas and Africa. From Africa, there's only like a handful of countries in there. You see Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa. So not all countries have been included in this survey. But in a way, it's the same development, yeah? Nigeria is going backwards there, but watch it, it will go up again. USA is trying to get the lead. South Africa is moving up. So this is now in the mid-90s. And then things start to happen. So Canada takes the lead in the Americas, and it's not going to give that away. And South Africa got a new constitution. It's the first country in the world where they put sexual orientation, not just in law, but in the constitution itself, as a protected category. And then the Constitutional Court uses that step by step. They get rid of the criminal laws. They acknowledge non-discrimination of couples, adoption, marriage, the whole lot. So South Africa goes almost out of the correlation curve. Whereas Chile and Puerto Rico, they're a bit more slowly. They're fairly gay-friendly, but legally it's nothing. Then there's a sort of close run between South American countries, but then Uruguay wins. First country to do marriage in Latin America. Countries only get half a point when only part of the country does it. So that's what's bothering the US. The US is fairly okay, but only in parts of the country. So that's what's holding it back. 13, 14. So this is the picture now. You see Algeria is, that's a recent, so it's been pretty much now, so it's less than 60%. So there's, that may be the Arab Spring things, yeah, so this is very recent, so the latest data of the social survey out, 2012-14. So South Africa is also interesting because it made its legal progress first, and then at least it shows a little bit more social progress. And of course we've all heard, so there's still great difficulties socially with violence and worse in South Africa, but perhaps the law is finally filtering through a little bit there. So both, and I can't prove which is causing which, but probably the things reinforce, since they're so close together. But it's very much Africa, but we'll hear more about that. The Caribbean is not well represented, but Trinidad is not doing too bad, and also made a progress here. Anyhow, that's a picture of the world. So now you're very optimistic, yeah? Everything will be fine. But the other thing, well, Russia, Nigeria, Uganda are the big examples of setbacks recently. There's another fact which is worrying, and I'll give you a handout which shows that in detailed graphs. The wonderful development of legal progress towards more recognition of homosexual rights, more possibilities to relate to someone of the same sex is slowing down dramatically in the world. The number of countries who started to decriminalize homosexuality went up and up and up, and the last 15 years is going down. The number of countries who introduced introduced anti-discrimination legislation. New countries, it's still some countries adding it, but it's far less than basically this century. Same for partnership. That also seems over its peak already. Cumulatively, it's getting better, but the pace, the speed of legal recognition in the world is slowing down. So stagnation is the word you have to remember. We're in a field that stagnates. And that's why I think the right to relate is important. Since the right to relate is one of the things, we need lots of things. We need more sophistication, we need more energy, we need more money, more knowledge, more resourcefulness to get the other half of the world. Yeah? So these are countries, they're nuts that are harder to crack. Or in another expression, I don't know, so there's more fruits to pick, but they are much higher in the tree. Yeah? So you need a new vocabulary. And I think the right to relate, like this whole neighbor issue, the right to relate might be. So here, no one has objected so far, so I assume that you are in favor of the right to relate. But it's amazing that, should you go to another religious congregation, would they not recognize that? So it may be a notion, and of course many people are trying that in different ways, but a notion that is easier to explain to others. So perhaps we should put a little bit less emphasis on the sex, on the individual, on the private life, on the gender aspects. No, it's just about relating, and not just relating between the lesbians, between the homosexuals, but also them and their parents, their friends, their circles, yeah, their classmates. The right to relate is a wider right. So it's a form of mainstreaming, if you like that term. So that's what I'm giving you. And remember this as a key aspect of orientation. And I commented that this church is wrongly placed, but I'm very glad with this thingy here. That's the east. That's where the sun comes up. That's where optimism, hope is there. So I'll make sure that with all the little words there, there's all kinds of words of wisdom you see. I'll put the right to relate there to remind you. So that is, yeah, my baby, but I think it sums up a development, and it's actually sort of so many more people have started to recognize that. Lawyers, judges, legal aid people. So that explains why we have the progress, and it gives a tool to get that progress further. Not on its own, but it's one of the elements we need. That's what I wanted to say in half an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll have opportunity for questions in just a few minutes, but where did Eric go? He just ran out. Well, that means that our next speaker today okay, any burning questions for...
Let me ask you this. How about the impacts of laws in one place affecting the social milieu somewhere else? So, like, you get, draconian laws in Uganda. You get draconian laws in Uganda, and suddenly Ghana, where the laws aren't comparatively as bad, you're getting people lynched and that sort of thing. On the other hand, I've heard a lot of times international activists kind of blaming the West for our progress because that's put more pressure on them, and the social reaction there has been later, or has been, worse. How do you analyze the difference, a law one place impacting other places?
It may be one of the reasons why we have stagnation. Is it working? Yeah. So it's very difficult to play that whole game. And no one should have the ambition to play the whole thing, since we can't control everything. But you need to be aware there may be side effects to everything. And that's also why vocabulary is important. Don't overstate things, since that may be dreadful somewhere else. Sorry, saying the
effect of same-sex marriage changing here in the States, how is that affecting the rest of the world? Are they affecting us, or is it just kind of simultaneously happening more?
Well, at first it was very simultaneous between North America and Europe, and Western Europe, and it sort of gave credibility on both sides. There were some people having a test case in the Netherlands, and later also in Germany and Spain. The fact that it also happened in Hawaii, and then later Massachusetts and other places, that sort of gave credibility to it. And there were articles, and when there was almost a bill in the Netherlands, it was easier for the Canadian courts, and similarly. So that has reinforced each other. But then you're talking about socially fairly similar areas. And then Latin America caught on to that as well after a little while. But now the law in Nigeria is actually called the Anti-Same-Sex Marriage Act, which is a strange thing, since the plans to introduce same-sex marriage in Nigeria were not even invented. So there's no one was planning that, and it would not make sense. Let's get rid of the criminal laws first. Let's get some protection. So it was used as a way, but the main clauses of that law are not against same-sex marriage, they're against same-sex organizations. LGBT organizations, they can't promote, so-called promote homosexuality. So it's used as an excuse. So it's very difficult to have the whole mechanisms, but it does have an impact, yeah. Right.
Do you find in other developed countries that have, shall we say, working democracies, that the legislatures are feeling the pressure to give reasons for not addressing the standards of equality and equal protection under the law, all the standards that we have that we're fighting on? Do you find other developed nations, legislatures that are feeling pressure to give reasons for not allowing due process to move forward in this area?
Well, finding good reasons, and that was a problem for, is this working? Finding good reasons to defend the exclusion of same-sex couples from marriage is very difficult. And then people can refer to children, to de facto couples, but they're all existing already. So that's also what's happening, I think, now in the US cases. It's becoming more and more impossible to rationally defend these laws. So once you sort of recognize there's nothing wrong with homosexuality as such, sexual orientation should not be a reason to discriminate, then it's almost impossible to justify further exclusions. Except there's one justification that's there, and that should be taken into account, and that is the sensibility of others. So in many situations, it might be better, easier, to have civil unions, to keep away this big notion of marriage, since then the civil unions, and then people have a chance to get used to same-sex couples being recognized, and then 10 years later you can discuss it again. And that's happened in most European countries, actually, that there was first some form of partnership recognition, only later full parenting rights, full marriage rights. So the gradualness of it is important, since even people who come out as gay, they have had a time sort of, oh, this is strange in me. They reject it, yeah? And you know examples of that. People need time to get used to it. So that's almost not just a pragmatic, but also like a moral imperative. You have to be gentle with the others, because they also need time to get used to it. And in many countries, marriage is such a central religious, economic institution. To suddenly change it abruptly, that would be a step too far. But they can do other things in the meantime. Recognize their right to live in the same house. Recognize the right to let their partner from another country live with them. Recognize their right to leave whatever possessions they have to the other partner without having an incredible tax. These little things already help a lot to respect that relationship and protect it from lots of things. So that's, yeah.
Great. Well, Eric is with us, and so I'm going to, if there's any other questions, we will, hang on, hold on just a second, we'll have more questions, time for questions in a little bit. Our next guest, Eric, if you could join us up here. Eric Gitari is the Executive Director of the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, Kenya, and has headed both the Kenya Human Rights Commission's LGBTI program and the Gender-Based Persecution Program of the Center for Rights and Education and Awareness. Gitari has been actively involved in the work that led to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights' recent adoption of a first resolution condemning violence based upon sexual orientation and gender identity. He is a litigant in Gitari versus NGO Coordination Board and the Attorney General of Kenya, a case that has significant implications for the constitutional rights of LGBTI Kenyans. His talk on law, religion, and LGBTI activism in East Africa details the potential scope of the case in a broader context of the state of sexual orientation liberation in the region. And so with no further ado, I'm going to invite Eric to come forward and to share with us.
I will sit here and tell you stories. Case spoke about the sun coming from the east, where we find hope in many religions. Our tribe, and I said I tell you stories, intersecting law, religion, and faith, used to worship the sun god. But beyond that, I would want to have a conversation.
You need to use the mic.
I need to use the mic, yeah?
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Yeah.
You don't speak out of your throat, you speak out of your mouth. So it's on the tape
I should
here.
have that,
You
yeah?
should have it, yeah.
No. I'll get that from. Thank you.
Only because we're recording.
Kenya is a democratic country within the East African section of the world. We come from the east. We are neighbors with Uganda. We are neighbors with Tanzania, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. We are different in the essence of how we have chosen to be governed in our constitution, which was written by the people of Kenya in 2010. And if you allow me, in the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'll just tell you stories that have no much legal account, but that seek to intersect what we are doing from the legal front and intersect with our faith and our struggle for justice in East Africa. The Constitution of Kenya mandates that state and religion shall be separate, regardless of how much evangelicals from the Americas are trying to influence the politics of the day. We have created a democratic space that has enhanced the Bill of Rights in a way that empowers individuals and communities to claim rights from the state in a powerful way that departs from the past where we were repressed. We have in many ways borrowed so much from the Constitution of South Africa that Professor Case was speaking about earlier. The reason that we exist, like in the organization that I work for, the National Gay, Lesbian, Human Rights Commission, is to make sure that this constitution, this document that we ratified, that we signed, that we agreed upon, that we voted for in a referendum, becomes a lived reality for every other Kenyan, inclusive of sexual and gender non-conformers. And I use the word non-conformity because most of the time it's not about a conscious decision to have a sexual political identity like LGBTIQ. It is because you're different, that's why you're targeted, and that's why you're prejudiced and placed at a disadvantage in society. Part of what informs my action in working for this organization, and perhaps that's the reason I am here, I will tell you stories about myself, about my work, about my country, about our culture. I was born in a Catholic family. I was brought up Catholic. I was baptized by the cardinal, who is, well, he's a cardinal right now in Kenya. The guys who vote for the popes. A few years ago, when I came out, I had a conversation with my folks about it, and I also had a conversation with the media about it. I don't know whether we've actually had lawyers in Kenya who came out as gay. But so when the media picked it and they published and aired it in national television, the Catholic Church called my parents. Because my dad is the chairperson of the local parish. And they wanted to find out why his son and his other son, my younger brother, who also was in the video, saying how he's confused about his brother, but he loves his brother, and he has no problem with sexual orientation, and he would not discriminate or treat anyone differently because of a sexual orientation. The Catholic Church wanted to find out why my parents were allowing their children to perpetuate, promote the commission of evil in society. A few weeks ago, before I came here, the Catholic Church came to bury my uncle. I think he died of the epidemic, the virus. And instead of comforting the family that was grieving, they chose to attack my family, to attack me, to speak about homosexuality and how low we have descended to the point that we would even get the Parliament of Kenya to discuss homosexuality as it did in March this year. I'm trying to find intersections and interests that would prevail upon your concern, your interest in coming for this meeting. And by thus doing, I will go ahead and tell you stories. I will not tell you about our constitution, I will not tell you about our laws, because our laws says that if any person has same-sex intimacy with persons of the same gender, they'll go to jail for 14 years. And if you want evidence of the enforcement of that law, I'll refer you to statements and reports that were given in Parliament in March 26, 2014, that since 2010 to 2014, 595 cases of homosexuality have been successfully prosecuted through the judicial system of Kenya. And by thus, Parliament agreed that Kenya is ahead of Nigeria and Uganda in enforcing its anti-gay legislation, and there's no need for any new laws or any stricter laws within the context of what Nigeria and Uganda was doing. So that's the space we operate in. The organization that I work for, the National Gay Lesbian Human Rights Commission, has been trying to get registration from the government of Kenya since April 2012, and 6 times I went to the NGO board of Kenya. 6 times they said no. 6 times gave the reason that was so standardized that the names of the organization are undesirable. They did not give the criteria that they came up to into finding or into arriving into the undesirability of the name. What was so undesirable about the name or the expression thereof? But every time the application for the reservation of the name of this organization was rejected on the basis of undesirability, and the words gay and lesbian were underlined or circled by the assessors. We choose to register or to express ourselves with the political name of Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission because it's important in a society that wants to stick stigma, guilt, and prejudice and exclusion to people who are presumed or who identify to be gay and lesbian. We choose to challenge the government to recognize that the fact is there are minorities, sexual or gender or otherwise, within society that might carry this identity, that might be presumed to be of this identity, but nonetheless are equal citizens of the Republic and must enjoy equal benefit and protection of the law. The Constitution of Kenya says that Kenya aspires to be an open and democratic society. And the purpose we exist is to enforce this, to realize this, to make our society as open and democratic as it can be. But going back to stories, because I don't want to be so legalese. When I came out, before I came out to my mom and dad, I came out to my grandmother, who I'm very close to, because she brought me up when my mom and dad were busy pursuing their careers. And when I told her that I'm a same-gender loving man, she had a very, very hard laugh, like for 2 minutes. You know how grandmothers laugh and laugh until you're like, are you laughing at me or with me? And then she paused and she told me, you did not have to tell me this. I'm like, why? I wanted to honor with my truth. I wanted to understand why I would not bring home a wife, a woman, and pretend that I'm trying to create a heterosexual family to please you, to please my parents or the community. And she goes on a tangent, like I am, to tell me stories of how when she was very young, she had this fatal disease. She was dying. And my grandmother is illiterate. She can't even sign in the bank with her name. She can't write. She can't read. She was born and brought up in the village in an era when the missionaries and the colonial government had not penetrated or established centers of learning. She says when she was very young, she was sick, she was dying, and the village called so many medicine people to come and treat her, and nothing worked until they got the medicine man of the last resort. It's called the Agwe. That's what they call them. The Agwe was traditionally, before the democratic, as they call it, civilization was imposed on the tribe. The Agwe were the high priest, if you like. They were the people who would advise the king of the tribe. They were the spiritual leaders of the tribe. And she tells me, this Agwe, he was married to men. He had male lovers. He had boy wives. And so she tells me, I don't know what you mean by gay or homosexual, but I know who you are. Your space in the universe of our understanding is not new. It is not alien. It is not different. It is not fresh. And I told the story to my father when I was coming out to him. My father went to a Baptist high school. My country, most of my country folks benefited so much from the missionary Adventism, because what the missionaries did is that they came in the name of social welfare. They came and built the infrastructure of schools, of hospitals, of centers of learning and healing, connecting to the human spirit. They came and displaced the traditional healers and the work they used to serve in society. But with that, they came with money bags and goodies. Come to our school, learn our religion. We'll give you a job. We'll give you privilege. We'll give you respect in society. Once you get that respect, people want to be like you. People want to be like you. That is a huge investment into shaping public perceptions, public policy. To the present, even before I go to the present, well, once that happened, a few years later, the East Africa company came in, which was British owned, British run. We were not colonized by Queen Victoria directly. She used a private company to run East Africa as a protectorate. And they relied on the infrastructure of what the missionaries did. And I'm saying this for us to understand the intersection between religion and law in Africa. For us to understand how the evangelicals are muddying the waters in terms of equality in East Africa. What yardsticks, what privilege, what power they have over the population that we are not getting. So, upon laying the infrastructure using social welfare, hospitals and goodwill and love, and close your eyes, let's pray, and then we take your land, what happened is a private company came in. And what the private company did, it didn't touch the church, as it was called then. Religion was not changed by the private colonial company. What it did, it came in and reinforced and supported what the missionaries were doing. They came in and used the goodwill that had been created to then tell the people that this is how we need to organize. And for us to organize, we need to delete, we need to remove all these variances in sexuality, in expression of self. We need to create a nation, not based on our common heritage, our common shared desire to be a people, but based on the interest of the company for the resources that are in that protectorate. And the understanding, which is very subtle, which is still present between the state and the church, even though constitutionally we are separated, state and religion, the understanding that was established a long time ago was that the state will leave the church alone by itself to do its own business, to do its own stuff. And when we got independence, as you still do in the US of A, you have political sovereignty, but I don't know whether the US of A has any cultural sovereignty. Maybe you do by using Hollywood to create cultural exportation across the world and create standards of lifestyle for others. But one of the things that we did not achieve cultural sovereignty as a people. We had the right to decide who will govern and rule us, and we still do. But we never reconciled our religious culture. We never reconciled our spirituality, our legislation, our notion as a people. We never had that chance to heal. It is so interesting that within 100 years, and if it seems absurd to you, yes, it is absurd. If it's irrelevant to you, it's irrelevant. But it's very, very, very strange that within 100 years, people were subjugated. They were taught a new language, a new religion, a new sort of institutionalized culture, and they still perpetuated to the present and defended vehemently within their sovereign structures such as parliament. It is interesting that in a country like Kenya that had communities which practiced spirituality, that had so much same-sex erotism and ritual sex, would still defend homophobia in such a powerful and nuanced way through legislation. It is strange, and I find it quite absurd. A country like Uganda, our neighbors who we share tribes with, would want to defend homophobia using legislation, yet their president, Museveni, in December last year, wrote a 7-page letter, confusing letter, to Parliament, explaining why he would not sign the anti-homosexuality bill into an act. And one of the reasons that he gave was that he's of the understanding that 200 years ago in Uganda, there were chiefs and rulers in the north of the kingdom who were homosexuals, and they did good things for the people. And it was a known issue for the people. It was not a concern. It was nothing. You love a man and you're a man. It's not my business. But your civic participation, your public participation in building society, in contributing to the welfare, the common good, was appreciated. So today, we are at a position where the global north, and this is not criticism. If you want to look at it as criticism, go ahead. But the global north, it is not the Europeans who are exporting homophobia. It is the Americans. They are the new missionaries. And now they are coming in the name of God Almighty to moralize the public space. They are coming to tell the people what is righteous, to tell the people what is their idea of justice. And they are coming in different forms. In Kenya, they are not coming with mega crusades that you see on television. They are not. They are using the civil society cloth. In Kenya, we have the East Africa Center for Law and Justice, founded by your very most good man, Mr. Pat Robertson, from the American Center for Law and Justice, from the 700 Club, who broadcast in 4 television stations, national stations, every Sunday in Kenya. And he tells us the most profound shit. I'll use those words in this church. He tells us such nonsense like, because the United States of America allowed gay marriage, the state of New York voted for gay marriage, That is why Hurricane Sunday struck, and that was God's punishment. And if we go ahead with allowing this Western influence in Africa, we will still suffer the epidemic of drought and famine, and people will die, and our children will starve. You know, people believe it. Do you know why people believe it? Because the Christians, based on the evangelical, not even the evangelical, the missionary style of how they came into Africa, how they built 95% of the Kenyan schools that we have presently, they control 90% of the education curriculum. They control our mind. They fund it, the education sector. To the present, the tax that we use to fund our education in Standard 5, Grade 5, when you're 10 or less years old, there's a course called Social Education and Ethics. It's compulsory for every child. At class 5, you're taught that homosexuality is a social deviant on the same footing with drug addiction, with armed robbery, and violent crime. Christian religious education is compulsory in primary school. They teach the most homophobic shit. Sorry for using that word, but it is nonsense. And I have no other honest way of describing it than that, because it's nonsense. They teach how homosexuality is evil, it's sinful, and how homosexuals will burn in hell. If you're doubting my content, I invite you to Google the Kenya National Examination Council, Christian Religious Education, Paper 2, 2010, Question 7. Give 10 reasons why Christians in Kenya are united against homosexuality. We will examine it. We will grade our sense of homophobia. Well, because, I don't know. I don't know, it's because the Christians fund it, or it's because the Christians have a lot of say on the content of the curriculum. But going back to what I was talking about the clothing of the evangelicals in Africa right now, they're coming in the name of World Vision. We will come and drill boreholes in the arid areas of northeastern Kenya. We will give sanitary towels and sanitary pads to the girls who are menstruating and who cannot go to school because they are feeling shamed of the stains when they are menstruating. But while we give them these sanitary pads, we will tell them that abortion is not against the will of God. It is against the will of God, sorry. It is evil, and if you do it, you will not enter the pearly gates. We will come and invade your culture by taking over things like male circumcision, which is a big deal in many tribes in Kenya. And what do? We will tell you, based on scientific evidence, if you share the same knife to cut the foreskin, you're transmitting diseases. So let's take your boys to the hospitals, which is more sanitary. And once we do that, we require your boys to go through a 1-week course while they are healing their penis. And we'll teach them how to be men in society. We'll teach them what masculinity is, what being a heterosexual is, what their place as men, what masculine power and privilege is, and they should not abdicate it. We, before all this happened, and by we I mean our ancestors. And so for the next 5 minutes, I'll tell you stories and then I'll conclude. So don't get so bored, okay? The Dagaras in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, they believe that amongst them, because the Dagara, I think they're the most famous African tribe in terms of spirituality. They believe that those amongst them who vibrated in a higher way other than everybody, people who experienced a higher sense of awareness, consciousness, they were gatekeepers between the spiritual world and the physical world. And these gatekeepers, these healers of the tribe, they were homosexuals or they were same-gender loving persons. They would engage in relationships, love with people of the same gender. The tribe that I come from, the one I was telling you about, and my grandmother, the Agwes, the high priests, they would engage in ritual sex. It's not very Christian. I know. I don't know whether Jesus would agree with it, but I know Jesus was a liberal guy who went against the establishment, and that's why they hanged him on the cross. But, but to bless the crop, to protect the land from pest invasion, the Agwes, they would go to the forest where they believed the spirits of their ancestors resided, reposed within the birds, within the trees, within the spirits of nature. And there, they would engage in such profound ritual sex between persons of the same gender. The Kikuyus, the main tribe in Kenya, where Mr. Kenyatta, the president who's at the ICC, comes from, they had the Oneki. The Oneki were the seers, the prophets. They lived in the forest. They used to marry boy wives. They would pay dowry to the families of these boys. And it was so much in parallel to the Roman centurion male servant system. In Congo, the Congo kingdom, which is a very, very, very famous kingdom in 8 BC, way before civilization was introduced, we guys were civilized. We even had universities in West Africa. Welcome to Timbuktu. Have you been to Timbuktu? You should look that up. But the Congo people, they had a very, very intricate system of training their warriors. The older male were required, it was a duty of the tribe to take upon themselves younger males, 14, 28. They would train them how to be warriors for 3 months. Part of that training involved blowjobs. Don't get too excited. But the purpose of this blowjob was very spiritual, which is very interesting because they believe that the younger male, once he sucks the penis of the older male and swallows the semen, the ritual of swallowing the semen would allow the transmission of the spirit of the warrior to pass on to the younger warrior, to dwell, to live, to grow in this younger warrior. And it was important because they had a lot of resources. They still do. The Congo, I think, is the most rich part of Africa. So they had a lot of resources and they wanted to defend the tribe. And they went all the way to consulting their ancestors and the spirits on how to pass on strength and victory to the tribe and the generations that came after that. The Zande in Sudan, in Zimbabwe, the lesbian women of the Zande, they were powerful. They would see, foretell the future, tell the tribe what to do, what not to do. They foresaw, foretold about the invasion by the colonizers. They advised the kings. Once the missionaries came, they said, all these healers, all these seers, all these prophets, all these people who are advising your kings, they're engaging in something that is very, 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 very dark, very evil. It's black magic, it's evil, it's witchcraft. The narrative is the same for oppression everywhere. They othered. To displace them, they constructed a narrative that was so exclusional, so dark. Which is what my father repeated to me when I told him I was gay. And when I told him about the story from my grandmother, he said that that was witchcraft that was being practiced. But how do you call witchcraft a practice that has sustained ancestors, generations beyond memory? How do you call that witchcraft? How do you erase the history, the culture of a people that was so profound to their belonging, to their identity, their well-being, to their connection to other tribes, to the universe, to the sun? How do we erase all that and impose the narrative of legislation that criminalizes them? So what are we doing? We're using the law as a yardstick to open the gates. We're using the Constitution of Kenya to seek an interpretation. The case that I filed in the Constitutional Court last year seeks something very simple: to interpret the Constitution of Kenya when we say that every person has the freedom of association, which includes the right to form, join, participate in an association of any kind. We want to know what every person means. Does it exclude certain people on certain characteristics? When we say associations of any, the word any kind of association, does it exclude associations by persons who do not conform sexually, gender or otherwise to mainstream society? And by that I mean gays and lesbians. And when we say that Kenya is a dualistic state in Article 2, Sub-Article 6, where we say all international conventions that we have ratified form part of Kenyan law. We have ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, which has been interpreted by the UN Human Rights Committee to say that the ground of sex, which is protected from non-discrimination, is analogous and includes the ground of sexual orientation. We want to see Kenya abide with its international obligation. We want to see that ground of sex in our constitution being interpreted in a broad way that includes the ground of sexual orientation being protected from discrimination, because people are being fired, people are being evicted from houses, people are being denied healthcare, people are being dehumanized in ways that are not told as most of you have been told about different experiences in the world. We want Kenya to participate in the world of nations in a way that is respectful of persons who love the same gender. We want to use the law as a door to open conversation to what our history as a people was, to what our culture was, to what our spirituality was. We want to bring a healing to the nation in a profound way, using social justice, using the law as a tool or as an instrument to get the gates open. And as I conclude, I bring you greetings from the Cosmopolitan Affirming Church of Kenya, which is a group of gays and lesbians who meet every Sunday in Nairobi to worship Christ and to want to be like Christ in terms of being rebels, liberal, anti-establishment healers who bridge the modern, the tradition, who use the Bible as a tool of bringing healing to people's lives. I hope that some of you will want, in your lifetime, before your transformation, come and worship with us in Nairobi. I will be more than glad to welcome you and to allow you to also do video coverage. It's very interesting that the church, the Cosmopolitan Affirming Church, has become a home for the asylum seekers. It is the site where some of us who are lawyers identify people who have crossed the border from Uganda seeking asylum in Kenya, and we direct them to the UNHCR, and we also provide them with social assistance in terms of housing and food to integrate them in the Kenyan society as they transition to their countries of asylum, because Kenya does not grant anyone aboard asylum in terms of staying or being a citizen. So, with a lot of love and respect, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for listening to me. I hope that the stories I've told, as confusing as they are, will enrich your spirits and will make you endeavor to participate more in bringing healing and justice to this beautiful universe where we are all partakers in. I hope that we'll find our intersections and interconnectedness as humans who have a shared desire for peace. I hope that we'll be inspired by the great master, Jesus, who broke all the barriers, who tore the cloak and made the lesser, the mightier, the slave and the master to be one. And I hope that I will once speak less. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very, very much. We're going to be able to ask Eric more questions soon as well, but I want to make sure we have time for Angeline. Reverend Neil and I met her at a gathering, a faith initiative by the Community Center, Los Angeles LGBT Community Center, and we're definitely moved by her story and what she's been doing, and instead of sitting back and allowing atrocities to happen, she put situations into action. And with no further ado, since I've introduced everybody else, let me hang on a second. Let's see if I can. Here we go. I can be millennial, as they say. Woohoo! I'm saving a tree, by the way. I didn't have to print this out. And she enjoyed Dyke March. And she's never been to a pride gathering, so we helped to change her ticket, which, by the way, will definitely get past the basket to help defray that cost too, so she could stay here and to participate in today as well as tomorrow. So it was a $200 addition to her ticket to change it. So anybody who would like to help in that regards, please do. Angeline Jackson is the founder of the only lesbian organization in Jamaica. She has been extremely busy with the startup phase of a new organization, Quality of Citizenship Jamaica. She has been working on several fronts to change the law, increase public awareness, and provide important health and social services to LGBT Jamaicans. The Caribbean region is heavily influenced by conservative Christian theology and public policy, and there is a triangle of influence that begins in conservative churches in the USA, is exported to Africa, and then comes to the Caribbean region to make life for people like Angeline extremely difficult. Wow, have we heard this story before? And you are 24. When she gave this presentation and everything that she did, I was like, oh wow, that's a lot for somebody in her 30s. And then she said, oh, and I'm 24. Go youth. Go Angeline Jackson.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say is, Eric, your presentation told me so much more about Africa than I've ever learned in my life as a Jamaican, right? And secondly, that introduction was very, very heavy, and it didn't sound like me at all. So I'm gonna start by, well, the first thing I should say to you is that if if your knowledge of Jamaica is limited to sun, sea, and sand, Bob Marley, marijuana, reggae music, I'm gonna be changing that because that's that's not Jamaica. That's not all of Jamaica. Um, in 2009, should I shift so that the camera gets me? Do I? Do I need to move? Do I move? Okay. Okay. All right. Not that I want myself on camera, but you know. Um, in 2009, I I had met a woman online, and it was during the time when I wasn't at school. And in Jamaica, we have a saying that the devil finds work for idle hands. So I was using the computer very idly, nothing productive. Um, I met the woman online, and I decided to meet her in person. I took the part of the safety precaution of walking with a friend, having a friend accompany me. And I'm gonna cut the long story short. On on the way to see her, so we were met by her stepbrother, and to be taken to the house. Um, we were using a shortcut, and again, another Jamaican saying, "Shortcut draw blood." Shortcuts are bad. Um, we were using the shortcut to get to the house, and along the way, um, a gunman came upon us. Had on a tam over his head, a hat, handkerchief tied up to his eye, and a gun. Um, he robbed us of our physical assets and our property, but also of our dignity. Um, I was I was forced to perform oral sex on the gunman, the stepbrother, and my friend. I was having my period. My friend had to do oral sex on the gunman and the stepbrother. And each time I tell this story, the worst part about it is knowing that in my taking a safety precaution and asking somebody to come with me, I ended up watching my friend get raped by two men. Um, we, the physical ordeal lasted probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. But then there was the emotional part because afterwards we we went to the stepbrother's, some grandmother's house or something like that. And we were there for another hour because we had no money. We could not get home. We were stuck in Spanish Town, which is just outside of Kingston. Um, we got some money, eventually got home, and my friend decided that she would not report the matter to the police, which in effect meant that she could not get any health services based on the rape. I decided that I was not going to sit down and let it just go. Um, called the police station and asked, I've been raped. What do I do? I was told I have to come back to the station. So I told my mom, because at 7 o'clock in the night, where I lived, there was no way I would have been able to leave home without stating where I was going. You know, mommy worked her mother's magic and was able to have two officers from Sissoka, which is the unit that deals with sexual abuse within the police force in Jamaica. They came to the house to do a preliminary report. We asked, should I not shower, brush my teeth, do you need evidence? We were told, no, you weren't raped, so we don't need any evidence. So of course, I showered and I brushed my teeth until I felt like if I could take everything out, I would do it. When the officers came, and as I was giving them the report, I believe it was either one or two of them, but whatever. Let's say one. One of the officers said to me, "You should leave this lifestyle and go back to church." And it's a statement that, of all the things that have happened, there are two statements that stuck with me. That was one. But knowing that here I was on the same night finally deciding to actually report to the police, and this was what you could say to me. I decided not to go to that police station, changed stations. Upon arriving at the other police station, the officer who started the intake process, because I'd written everything out. I watched Law and Order, you need to have all the evidence and so on, right? So I had it all written out, handed it to the lady, and she was reading it, and then she put the paper down and looked up in the sky and said, Jesus Christ, another one. I've since come to learn that, along with myself and my friend, there were at least 3 other women who had suffered the exact same violation by the very same people. And therefore, I have come to my own conclusion that we were deliberately targeted because we were either lesbian or bisexual. Okay, so that's my story. In that event, that it was a life-changing event for me, and on my business cards I write, you know, activism is a rent I pay for my time on earth, or I want to leave the world a better place. And it came out of 2009 when I thought about it and I said I could have died, and I didn't. But I was 19. And so what did I do in the past 19 years to contribute to anything? And so it became, for me, that moving point that, okay, I need to do something. And I started becoming involved in LGBT activism, which is not so easy in Jamaica. We're probably not the homophobic capital of the world, and a lot of Jamaican LGBT people have a problem with that definition, but we are very homophobic. In 2012, I finally, I guess, got my break on the international scene within LGBT activism. I was invited to the World AIDS Conference, sponsored by St. Paul's, who again brought me here this time around. And within that time, we had various meetings, one of which was a meeting with the World Bank, where I heard the term quality of citizenship. And it's something that Eric spoke about within Kenya and Kenyan society. And I heard the term quality of citizenship for all people, you know, because the bank is interested in dollars and cents. And if LGBT people do not have the same quality of citizenship as the rest of society, then we're going to be lacking out on some dollars. And so January 22, 2013, one day before my birthday, Yalna Broderick and I decided to start Quality of Citizenship Jamaica. We decided when starting it that it was going to be focused on women because, I mean, generally and globally, men are always at the front of everything. Men get all the attention. We know within the LGBT movement that the men have, right, so I don't need to go any further with that. And it's the same in Jamaica. And we wanted to change that. We recognized that there was a lack in services provided for us as women. And we noticed it through persons who were asking us, how can we get help? Where can we get help? And we couldn't really direct them to somewhere that they could get that kind of help and support. I think we've done fantastic in a year and some months, considering that most of it was the first year, most of it was 98% out of pocket. And I'm a full-time student, and Yalna Broderick is fully employed to QCJ but not paid. We run the organization out of my apartment, and it's a tricky situation because when my parents know that I am gay, and that conversation didn't go too well because that conversation ended up with religion, Angeline, religion. The end game was that, well, you know, our faith says that being gay is wrong, and therefore we love you as our daughter, but love the sinner and hate the sin. So I still have their support in school, but you know that support that you love to have when you're doing so much work, it's, you know, it's a support that's lacking. Anyway, let me stop rambling on and go to the rest of what I wanted to say. Um, in in the first year of our organization, we did a survey using Google Docs because we love to do free or cheap. Not that we have much of an option. Um, and so last year we did a survey using Google Docs. We got 101 respondents, and one of the statistics I want to share with you from that was that 42% of our respondents indicated that they had some history of sexual violence throughout their life. We don't know if it's correlated, but 42%. And of that 42%, 60% did not report the matter to any authority. That statistic lines up perfectly with the general statistics. 1 in 3 women in Jamaica have had some history of sexual violence. Um, so, you know, that was also a driving point for me, because it now became, this is my story, this is my experience. How now can I transmit that story, my lived reality, to encourage somebody else to want to come forward? And coming forward is very difficult because what has happened, and it's not just to me, but various women, lesbian and bisexual women, who have been raped or sexually assaulted, who have gone to the police, have more or less gotten the same message. You've deserved this, you're a lesbian, this is your fault, you brought it upon yourself. You know, it's your fault. It's still the victim blaming, but it's a lot more targeted in how it is said because, well, you're a lesbian and you caused it. Um, I might be all over the place and scattered. I'm sorry. The 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 mission or the vision of QCJ is to improve the quality of lives of lesbian and bisexual women. And now, since we work with transgender people, transgender persons as well, and we say it generally because we have recognized that we have both trans men and trans women in Jamaica. They're not very visible, but they are there. We want to train up female leaders within the LGBT movement because I personally believe that we need female leaders at the forefront of this movement to get anything done and to get persons to get to get the wider society to really want to see why it is that we need to be treated as equals. And of course we want to conduct research, proper research, not free research using Google Docs online. I wanted to touch on faith. Um, we we don't have such rooted cultural, spiritual experiences as our African brothers and sisters because, well, we were uprooted, and what we have is what we were subjugated with. But Jamaica is predominantly a Christian society, and the fundamentalist interpretation of scripture plays a very large part in in the discourse about LGBT rights and the simple task of whether or not we are going to, one, review our anti-sodomy law, and then when we review it, if we do, are we going to change it? Faith is a big component in that. The way American evangelical Christians have come into Jamaica, it's not guns blazing, having a conference, putting on something at our national stadium. It's very subtle. Civil society organization and I forgot what I was going to say. But it's very subtle. Civil society organizations and groups such as the Lawyers Christian Fellowship of Jamaica and the Jamaica Coalition for Healthy Society, who all believe that because we are gay, we are a threat to society health-wise, we are, mentally disturbed, and they're going to save us from ourselves. what happens, and there was a question that was asked about the global north moving forward and how it affects us. What happens is that when you see the progress happening in the US and Canada, and you know, it becomes your people, fake people, your people come to our country and on the invitation of our own people and say, well, you cannot allow the anti-sodomy law to go, because if it does, then this is what is going to happen. Look at what is happening in America. Parents can't, children are being told that being gay is normal and gay families are okay, and you won't be able to tell your children, you know, that that's wrong. And wow, religion, you won't be able to say that homosexuality is sinful, right? So that's what they do, and it is again our own people who are inviting them in, and that message that they come with. So what is the experience of other LGBT Jamaicans? Gay men in Jamaica are more prone to physical violence. We usually, I don't know if you've seen some of the stories about mobs going in houses, stoning people. You might have heard a story of Dwayne Jones, a trans homeless teen who was murdered last year in just outside of Montego Bay, happy-go-lucky resort town of Montego Bay. And Dwayne's body was left at the side of the road after being stabbed, shot, and run over by a car. Dwayne's body was dumped at the side of the road, and people returned to the street party and continued dancing. Nobody called the police. That's what's happening. And it's not that it happens every day, but the fact is that it can happen. And there are times when it does. And one time is one too many. For lesbian women, for us, the violence is a lot more sexual. Women generally, and it's the same thing for lesbian women and bisexual women. It's a lot more sexual. And because of the nature of sexual violence, women don't report. And because they don't report, we are not sure what the figures are, aside from our very loose online survey. Of course, both gay men and lesbian women, we have the verbal assaults, the Jamaican slurs, batty man for dead, sodomite, must get raped, gay man, lesbian woman. That's what happens. And what I want to say is that it's not that every day this happens in Jamaica. It's not that every day somebody gets stoned. It's the fact that people interpret our anti-sodomy law to mean to say that being LGBT is illegal, and then it moves from just being LGBT as an illegality to them deciding to take matters into their own hands. And so it's not that it happens every day, but the fact that it can happen on any day is the problem, because you then have that emotional and mental burden of knowing that, is today the day somebody's going to stone me? Is today the day somebody's going to kick my door in and pull me out? Is today the day I'm going to get evicted from my community and be unable to get my property? Well, the government does nothing about it. You know, it can happen any day, and it's what you have to live with. And I think outside of how horrible the physical violence is and how horrible the sexual violence is, that mental anguish, that shadow is terrible. It's something that I believe nobody should have to live with. I wanted to talk about our homophobia and culture. And Eric again, I mean, well, it's Jamaica, of course, we're very close. I thought of it and I said, you know, Jamaica's homophobia is this melting pot. We like to talk about our culture as being a melting pot. We're out of many one people, except gay people. And and our homophobia is just like that. It's a melting pot. It's religion, it's culture, it's music, and the misogyny that goes with religion. Our culture, unfortunately, is religion and music intertwined because we cannot separate the two. I think we lack that proper cultural identity. Again, our displacement and how we came, right? But it's that melting pot. And so gay men, especially effeminate men, are seen as taking on a female role. And why would you lower your lofty status in society and in life to become a woman? Why would you do that? You know? And that's how it's perceived among gay men, and of course with lesbian women. For the more masculine women, well, she's making one less woman available in society. Although there are so many Jamaican women, right? But one less woman available. Um, so so that's culture and our homophobia. I wanted to also mention Dwayne's house. I just mentioned the story of Dwayne Jones. My organization, Quality of Citizenship Jamaica, we work very closely with Dwayne's House, which is a new organization that was started after Dwayne's death by a group of activists because we did not want to see the same thing happen to another trans youth, another homeless youth. We have many homeless youth living in the sewers of Kingston and on the streets in Kingston and Montego Bay. And we want to take them off the streets and put them in a shelter. We'll start with the basics. Getting them off the street is the first part. Many of these youth have been kicked out of homes from as young as 14. A lot of them engage in sex work to survive. And what's tragic about it is that a lot of them are paid extra for unprotected sex. The last thing I wanted to mention is that work is being done. Since I've destroyed your vision of sun, sea, and sand, I want you to know that it is not all dismal. There are people who are doing things. QCJ is the only registered lesbian and bisexual organization in Jamaica. There are groups, but we're the only one registered. There are other groups and other organizations that are working to move LGBT rights forward. Problem is that we've been working since before I was born, and we're still working, and we haven't reached anywhere with the government. But I am hopeful that change will come, and it will come within my lifetime, particularly because I plan to enter politics. So, you try to change it from the inside. You try and change it from the inside. Nobody's doing it for you. Go and do it yourself. But I want you to know that things are being done. Earlier this year, QCJ, we received a grant from AIDS Free World, which is the only money we've gotten this year. But we were able to use that to do an advocacy and documentation training. So, and it was with lesbian and bisexual women and a trans man, right? How can you get the stories so that we can document it, so that we can say this is the evidence, and we can then use it for advocacy and legal purposes. I lie when I say that's the only money because we received another grant, but we used that to do a workshop, a self-defense workshop, which came out of the survey that we did last year. Women wanted to know how to defend themselves and how to understand the legal system in Jamaica. And so our self-defense workshop included understanding the law and knowing your rights under the law. A case in point, I did not know that lesbian and bisexual women were not included in section 70 something. Oh Lord, this is going on tape. Lesbian and bisexual women are not included in a section in the anti-sodomy law until a couple weeks ago. I'm an activist, and I didn't know that because the police who know it will, and sometimes they don't know it, will say to us, and as have been my experience, you are engaging in gross indecency, and that is illegal between women. and therefore we are going to take you to jail. And many women don't know that. So it was, learning these things. And what do you do if you are arrested, if you are approached by the police? So work is being done. It's not all dismal, but of course we need support. I'm begging money. We need support. And it's not just financial, it's community. There are two faith communities in Jamaica that are open and welcoming of LGBT people, Science of Mind and Unity, but they're not very engaged in social justice, which drives me nuts. There used to be a meeting, an MCC gathering in Jamaica, supported by Sunshine Cathedral in Florida, but it has since died down. And I believe that there is still space for other faith communities in Jamaica, affirming faith communities, who can help to counter what we are hearing from the conservative religious community. And I believe that that's the role that faith can help to play in Jamaica and in other countries, East Africa, help to play in moving us from, because faith is so central to us. Faith is central to us. And how can we include faith in the dialogue for why it is that you need to give all people the same quality of citizenship? Thanks.
Case and Eric to come up for just a second. If there's and is the other microphone here? Thanks. First of all, I have no words that can express the level of gratitude for what you have shared here today in enlightening and to telling us your story, because stories is what connects us. I want to highlight something. Case said, we shouldn't necessarily be talking about sexual orientation, but about the right to relate, because people can understand that, because people get stuck on the word sexual, that this is about a right to relate to one another. And Eric, in a similar vein of, reminding us that, our ancestors, all of our ancestors, really got it, and how can we, reclaim our history, our own history. And as a queer Christian woman, it breaks my heart when I hear of what fundamentalist Christians in both countries, and we know here in this country, have done, and how can we, as a concerned people, counter that, if you will, without being missionaryistic ourselves. And, great white hope comes in to bring the liberal message. And in the conversation that took place last week, when Reverend Neil and I met Angeline, what was brought up was, in your country, especially with Dwayne's house, you're talking about sexual orientation again, but the fact that there are children who are beaten, this is the effect of homophobia. The effect of homophobia is, a young man being stabbed and shot and run over and nobody cared, because that's what people can relate to and how important that is. But overall, for us here, especially in Los Angeles, we have it pretty good, quite frankly, in the queer community. Comparatively, we have it. We're one of those dark blue areas on the map that Case showed. So, where do we go from here? As this particular church even. And it was great to hear, John, that your denomination, Science of Mind, is one of two outly supportive denominations in Jamaica. But traditionally not active, yes. And traditionally not active. So what can your faith tradition do? But that it's a step. And in regards to what we can do here in the U.S., what else do we fight for? Great. Marriage pretty soon, I think, will be legal in the U.S. in total. What else do we want? We can have kids. ENDA. you know, the fine tuning of what we need. But really, and somebody said this, you know, the next, remodeling our kitchens, yes. But the next step of what we should be doing and thinking about are our brothers and sisters in the rest of the world. You know, the rest of the world. And, you know, and how can we do it and do it in a way that is not in a missionary way? But what can we do as your brothers and sisters, as you as our brothers and sisters, to continue to teach one another and to help one another? So I have one question. We will have to wrap up in about 10 minutes because we do have a worship service at 5. There is a reception in the Ryland room where we can ask more questions and stuff like that. But one of the questions I do want to pose to you, because it came up, you know, what is it do you think that we can do? And when I say we, you know, this church, this community, the U.S. activists, you know, what can we do with and faith as a faith community? What can we do to be of assistance for, especially for the two of you in Jamaica and Kenya? So, and that can be a specific or a more philosophical, more philosophical, but also a specific. You know, what can we do overall, and what can we do, you know, specifically? So.
I think what the faith community can do is to help those congregations that are at the movable middle. They're willing to have dialogue. They're willing to question and to discuss. I mean, it's not going to work with those who are dead set in their ways. And I'm not targeting those who are already affirming. Those who are in the middle, who can move either way, those are who we need to talk to, because somebody's going to catch them. The
You
question
mean
is,
the ones in Jamaica or the ones in the US?
well, not the US, but
No.
Kenya, Jamaica, meaning, well, the question was, you know, our countries. So, you know, the people of faith who are in our countries, who are in the movable middle, who can have that dialogue, who want to have that dialogue. The question is, how do you go about having that dialogue? We can, you know, flesh out the details afterwards. But it is helping them to start that conversation and have that dialogue. What I can say is that what the St. Paul's Foundation did, and it was something that I had suggested to them, was, I'm sorry, we black people like to see black people telling us how we got to where we got to. And so, you know, they did a film called Love Heals Homophobia, which had 4 African American clergy saying, you know, this is why we, you know, moved from this position of hate and intolerance to being able to love and accept LGBT people. And it was, you know, it's going to be very instrumental because it's my color talking to me. I'm sorry, you know, white people, for us it comes on to almost a savior complex, and that sometimes it's how it comes across. And the other thing I want to say is that what the faith community and in general activists across the world, especially those who do not look like our color, need to learn is that you cannot go in to a country to help without asking the people on the ground, what are you doing, what do you need, and how can we help you? Yeah. It doesn't work, because what happens is that it usually backfires. You know, we go in all guns blazing thinking that this is how we did it in the States and this is how it's going to work here, and it doesn't. I could say case in point is the Beverly Hills Hotel, but I'll leave that alone. But if you read the dialogue that's going on around it, it's not really helping the situation. And I mean, yes, activists want to help, but there's a method to everything. And the method in this case, for a lot of us, is to talk to the activists on the ground. But specific to the faith community, it is how can we help the people in the movable middle get to the point that we are, that you are, and helping to form and shape that dialogue.
I am profoundly not going to rehash what my sister said. I think you came from the Zandes. powerful. But what can the faith community do? Very simply, I think we can, as brothers and sisters from the universe, make connections to people in our countries, in our regions, who are struggling to reconcile their sexuality and their faith, people who are struggling with suicide. Just be a friend to someone. I'm not asking this from a church, I'm asking this from people. You as a person, make a connection, build someone's spiritual psyche and understanding of how the good master actually came for justice and not to enslave and make people feel unworthy and unwanted. Two, which is not very directly linked to everybody, but I would want to see a level of support in terms of helping us reclaim our spiritual sovereignty as a people in a way that is very harmonious to Christianity, in a way that connects all rivers into the same sea. What do I mean by this? We have a lot of spiritualities that have deep and profound respect for communion with other spiritualities, including Christianity. If we have a way of being brave enough and bold enough to make all these connections happen in a way that is respectful, as my sister was talking about, that is contextual, that is, I don't know what, I don't know the methodology, but making those linkages and those connections happen and understanding all the rivers that we have, our Christianity, our Islam, the cosmopolitan church in, affirming church in Kenya, all these things that we are doing, it's all the same God. It's all the same creator. Making those connections happen in a way that brings healing. I don't know what else to say. But from a faith point, I want to see that happen.
We are at 4:15, so I'm going to ask us to come to a close right now in this room. But I'm going to invite folks into the Ryland room where there is some refreshments set up to be able to connect with them a little bit more. There is also, Angeline does have a book and some other information that she has for folks, and there is also some opportunities to donate. I will put a basket out there as well, that if you would like to be able to help defray the costs for her to be able to have been here today to be with us and to share with us, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And to, I'm just incredibly indebted to all three of you.
There'll be a handout as well, 2 handouts for me,
and
with
2
more data
handouts
that you
from
can read up.
Case. He also
The whole world.
He also has handouts. And I think step number 1 of what Eric just said, of building relationship, has begun today, not just receiving information, but connecting one heart to another. So let's show our appreciation and join together in the Ryland room, please.